Blender, Maya, ZBrush, 3ds Max, they all have pros and cons to them. But Blender being free, there's, in my opinion, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, there's going to be more like tutorials, more videos, more YouTube videos, obviously just more information. Welcome back to another episode of the Nebulos Entertainment Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about animation softwares. Eric, again, is going to be taking the brute force of the information. But he's used multiple softwares, and we want to talk about animation softwares and how they integrate into, why can't I think of the word, dude? I'm drawing a blank. Integrate into the engines, right? So whether you're using Unity or you're using Unreal, or there's other engines out there, but those are obviously the big two that most companies use. So we can dive into the first one. Eric, giving a high-level comparison, just list off some of the animation softwares and 3D softwares that you've used.
Okay, so I've had experience primarily with Blender and ZBrush for our purposes, but I've also dabbled into Maya and 3DS. And I mean, for just starting out, obviously the no-brainer would be to lean into Blender because it's the free option, and it's incredibly strong. So I think a lot of what you learn in 3D modeling comes down to the art in and of itself. Like, you learn how to manipulate forms and get different shapes and get your edge flow and polygon counts clean and all that kind of stuff that, a lot of people kind of understand that are in that space. But when you're just starting out, learning those sort of baseline best practices you can do in any of these softwares, so why not do it in one that's free with Blender? So I recently, I've looked into the different effects software packages, but I don't have much experience with any of those. Like, Houdini is a big one, that, a lot of simulations, like fluids and explosions and things like that, and that's sort of a gray area for me right now. So I think we'll just kind of stick to what I would consider the basic 3D modeling and animation, kind of like you said, Cam, just
right,
the well-known ones.
Yeah, so Blender, Maya, ZBrush, 3ds Max, they all have pros and cons to them. But Blender being free, there's, in my opinion, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, there's going to be more like tutorials, more videos, more YouTube videos, obviously just more information out there because the user pool is a lot bigger than, 3ds, Maya, ZBrush. I think ZBrush is reasonable. What was it, Eric? It was like $60, $70?
For the base for ZBrush. So ZBrush, now I don't know what their pricing structure is now. I think to buy the full suite when I bought it was maybe $600, but it was like a permanent license. So I think, because I still have it, and I've used it, but to be totally honest, Blender's their sculpting, I don't even know what to call that, pipeline or toolkit is becoming better and better. And for the level of detail that I go for, especially for game development, in a game, you're not going to have a model with, billions of polygons or triangles. You're going to try and keep it limited, and ZBrush is great for those super high-res, polygon-dense models that are as lifelike as you can imagine. And those work well for things like normal maps, which is just a fancy way of having realistic textures on something.
Right.
But for the sake of what we do and what I think most people starting out would be doing, if you're looking to get into animation, you're not going to be needing those insane polygon counts. So why not try Blender? The sculpting workflow is super similar to ZBrush. So again, those skills, if you learn them, you can transfer them over. And yeah, you have to learn new keybinds and the actual software terminology and everything, but it's the core principles of the modeling
Exactly.
that you learn.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the most important.
right, because if you're unsure of if this is the path you want to go down, don't be springing a couple $100 to test it out. First and foremost, try with Blender, because to Eric's point is more than likely what you can do in one software you can do in another. It's just to Eric's point again, like the keys are going to be different. Where you find things are going to be different, so that the navigation is going to be a little bit different, which that might be it can be a huge pain. But I looked up the ZBrush pricing. So 1 month $39.95, 1 year $359.90, and then the one-time costs being $8.95.
Okay.
So comparing that to zero, I mean, but I get it. Like, I get companies have to make money, but Blender is doing it well. Have you? So I know you have a little bit of experience in Maya and 3ds Max, right? Looking, because 3ds Max is Maya. No, 3ds Max is Autodesk. Maya is not Autodesk.
Both of them are.
Both of them are.
Yes.
Okay, so looking at the subscription for 3ds Max, it is $225 monthly, $1785 annually, or paid every 3 years, which they're saying is the best value, of course, because it is the most highest price. It is $5,085 for every 3 years.
Oh boy!
Wow.
So I can see now from my understanding, because again, I haven't gone into them at the level that a professional studio would, let's say a Pixar or some company that's using these software to do a lot of the heavy lifting. I do know that they do have more functionality in terms of what I was talking about earlier with like their effects rendering, like liquid simulation and
right.
Things like that. So there are obviously trade-offs, but again, I just go back to and what you have said. If you're starting out, learn on something that you can learn on for free, so that you're not essentially throwing money away on. Because if you get into 3D modeling, you say, okay, this is not for me. Well, there's, let's say you subscribe to a year of 3ds Max, you're quite a large.
Yes, you are $17.25 down. And so Maya is the same price. So Maya is going to have the same pricing structure as 3ds Max. So,
Okay.
It's, yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Both being Autodesk. But yeah, I mean, $1,700 for a year is a lot of money. Blender is very powerful. It started out, it started out like a free product, like you would expect it to be free. But since then, man, has it gained ground and has it begun to really compete with the big guns? And good for them.
Like everything from, like you said, like it's kind of started out from what I remember. Now I should look at their release, notes and kind of learn what their packages included with each release. But I remember when they added the sculpting, that was down the road from the initial launch, but that was a big deal. Like, people were like, oh my god. And it started out simply. I think when it started out, it had a handful of tools, like maybe 6 tools. And ZBrush had 50 or whatever it was. But now, the suite of tools in Blender has grown, probably not to be that high, but there's very little you can't do with their modeling.
And if there's just on top of that, if there's something in particular that you're looking for, then obviously you should look into softwares. Like if you're knowing that you're going to be doing more liquid animation, then I would definitely research which software and packages might be best for you. because Blender might not be the best option. And they
Right.
do have integrations, right? But you need to first and foremost figure out like, okay, what is it that I'm trying to do? Because maybe Blender isn't the best option for what you want to accomplish. So you got to have a plan before you go into a particular software, I would say. But if you're going in just for the sake of like trying animation, trying a little bit of rigging, 3D, whatever the case is, then yeah, I would say Blender is probably your best bet because to mine and Eric's point is it's free to start.
For sure. And I think the next sort of step from that and building upon your point is, let's say you know what you want to do in the industry. Let's say you want to be not an indie dev. Let's say you want to get in and work for Pixar or DreamWorks or some studio, game studio, whatever. And okay, I want to be a high level character artist or something. You can do the research and see what those studios use, and then you can decide yourself, okay, if I'm doing these high level models, Blender may not cut it for those level of polygons, so I might need to jump into ZBrush. So you get ZBrush, learn it, master it, build yourself a portfolio. That way,
Right.
your money is going towards something that is going to bring in a return for you in the future.
Right. And along those lines, if you're trying to get noticed by studios, I mean, a big thing, there's a lot of fan pages out there, right? So maybe you start animating or building some characters related to, Pixar or Disney. You got to be a little bit careful. Obviously, no copyright infringement. Or what you can do is also add your own unique spin to it because those studios they look for the uniqueness. They look for what you can bring to the table that they already don't have, right? Because they don't need just another animator or another 3D model expert that can do the same thing that everybody else there can do, right? They want you to be unique. They want you to be different. So how are you? How do you plan to be? Like, what can you bring to the table that they don't already have? Right. So it's important in that aspect of things because they want to see that look like you can bring the skill level that they have to your modeling and the professionalism to your modeling. And because when it comes to art, I mean, Eric will tell you firsthand, there are a billion ways of how you can interpret art and the emotion that goes into it and the look and the feel for art. Right. So if you're trying to get noticed by specific studios, play to their hand in terms of what their aesthetics are. So
Absolutely.
yes, sir. Is there anything else that you would say in terms of ZBrush, Maya, 3ds Max, Blender? Are there any other honorable mention softwares that you would tell people to maybe take a look at?
I'm sure there are. Actually, recently, I forget it might have been maybe $20. I use Procreate for 2D art on my iPad, but there is a sculpting software on the iPad Pro called Nomad. And I've used it a little bit and experimented. It's pretty fun. Again, if you have an iPad, if you don't have a computer or something, and you want to get a little experience with 3D modeling, that might be a viable option for you. So, in terms of though, just getting introduced to the whole world of that and getting yourself a portfolio or a show reel or something put together, you can, I would say, start with Blender, learn what you like, what you don't like, and learn what you need. And if Blender doesn't have it, you're obviously savvy enough, if you're listening to this podcast, probably to kind of understand what is out there in terms of 3D software. But the big ones, as we've talked about, are 3ds and Maya. Those are kind of like the titans of the industry.
Yeah, they're like AAA.
Oh yeah, quad A, AAA. Yeah, they're used by so many industries. So we could go down that rabbit hole a totally different day, because I think there is merit for a discussion on the different types of 3D art, like Cam talked about, like playing to a certain hand. But for the sake of beginning, I say Blender all the way. I love it.
Yeah. We can end the podcast there. And if you want to know about our latest project, Project Night Owl, be sure to head over to our Patreon. That starts at $1 a month. You can get access to all the dev journals, to early releases of the podcast, and so much more. If you haven't already, try out Storm with Sales. That's available for free on iOS and Android. Again, it doesn't cost you anything. Go check it out, see what we were capable of doing for our first game. Thank you all for taking the time to listen. You can follow us on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook. We have the gist of it at Nebulos_ENT to stay up to date as well. But again, the Patreon has more behind the scenes, more in-depth dive than our social media posts. Above all, remember that there is a story in all of us, but it's up to you to choose how you write yours.